I never played the Tron video game.
That's a movie about a video game.
Yeah.
A video game
God.
about a movie about a video game. This video could be a video game.
Pixelkin.
Hello and welcome to The Issue. I'm Simone de Rochefort.
I'm Courtney Holmes.
And today we're going to talk about Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. But we're not going to talk about what you think we're going to talk about. Did you think we were going to talk about Quiet? We're not going to talk about Quiet. There's a fancy little graph floating around the internet comparing Metal Gear Solid 5 sales of $179 million in its first day to Age of Ultron's sales in its first day, which, as quoted by the graph, are 84 million. And Ben Kuchera on Polygon pointed out that that's not global sales, that was just the US sales, and a lot of other problems with comparing games to movies besides.
A lot of people are seeing this graphic and thinking, oh, this is proof that video games are outselling movies and video games are the new dominant mode of our culture. As Mr. Kuchera points out, it's like even worse than comparing apples and oranges. There was actually a factual error in that one in particular. It said that Age of Ultron got 84 million on its opening day when actually that was just in the United States. So that comparison out the window. There's a lot of good things we can learn about video games by looking at the trajectory of movie history and by looking at films as an entertainment medium, absolutely. Financially, it doesn't make any sense because, for one, Metal Gear Solid 5 costs $60, whereas apparently the average movie price of a ticket is less than $5 worldwide, which
I would have had to go see Age of Ultron like 6 times on opening day to equal one copy of Metal Gear Solid, which already seems like a bad basis for comparison.
Yeah, another thing is the way that movie sales work versus video games. Metal Gear Solid 5 sold a ton on opening day, and its sales are just gonna go downhill from there. Whereas Age of Ultron, overall, it's the money that it was able to make while it was in theaters is just like staggering compared to Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah, Age of Ultron ended up making $1.4 billion during its theater run, which I think we discussed that's probably more than Metal Gear Solid is gonna make in its lifetime.
Yeah, and when you consider the fact that movie tickets are way cheaper than the video games, that means the number of people who went to theaters to see this movie vastly outstrips the number of people who went to buy Metal Gear Solid 5.
Yeah. I'm curious about why we have this urge as a culture to compare video games to movies as if one day video games were going to surpass movies and become the new movies, because it seems to me like they're completely different mediums. And like you said, there's definitely things that we can learn. But the idea that someday video games will replace movies and be identical to them, at least in terms of the market, seems kind of, I don't understand
It's
it.
about as logical suggesting that the existence of movies is going to replace books, which I'm sure people were worried about when movies first came around. Sure enough, there's still books everywhere. Go figure.
Those darn books, when will we be rid of them?
Video games, comics, movies, books, these are all different ways of transmitting a story. And a lot of times when you remember a story, you remember the characters and the settings sort of more than you remember the way that you took it in. However, that intake process is very different from each of those methods. So it makes sense that you would want to compare them, especially because we don't have that many different ways of transmitting stories between human beings.
The games that marry their story and their gameplay the best are the ones where you couldn't have that story in any other medium, and that has to be how it was given to you.
I would say that that's true of every art form. Form is an extension of content. You could try to tell the same story or give the same emotion in a poem or in a book, but each one of those forms would give you an inherently different content. I think when you are creating any kind of art, you want to pay attention to the way that you're transmitting it. Both video games and movies are often multi-million-dollar projects that have huge teams of people working together. They often, but not always, tell a story. Obviously, every cutscene is picking up a lot of hints from film and cinematic history, everything we know about framing shots and about video editing.
So maybe that's where part of the urge to compare and contrast comes from, is that we have all this language developed over years and years of watching movies, and we're still trying to work out how that applies to games and what parts of the language work for games and what parts don't. So what do you think about video games and movies? Why do people keep trying to compare them? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure you subscribe to this channel to catch the next episode of The Issue. The real question is, what are we going to base bad movies off of if video games replace movies and vice versa? Would we have to make bad video games based on movies? We already do that too.